Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. What if the key to transforming your leadership style and your life was hidden in the power of empathy? On today's episode of My Perfect Failure, I'm joined by Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller, a remarkable leader who traded her career as a French horn musician, performing alongside legends like Ray Charles, for a new calling, reshaping leadership with empathy and emotional intelligence. In this conversation, Melissa shares her journey of resilience, how she turned personal trauma into a drive for compassionate leadership, and why building a strong organizational culture starts at the top. Plus, Melissa also reveals the important role of middle managers in leadership success and the data-backed benefits of empathy in the workplace. This episode resonated deeply with me. It's a powerful reminder of how setbacks can fuel reinvention and meaningful change. If you're ready to explore how empathy can redefine your leadership qualities, press play and enjoy this inspiring conversation.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I have another fantastic guest for you. So, joining us today, we have a renowned empathy and EQ consultant who has dedicated over 3 decades to enhancing leadership through emotional intelligence. Her expertise is particularly relevant in addressing modern leadership challenges like quiet quitting, the great resignation, and remote work friction. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller. How are you?
I'm fine, Paul. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So am I. And there was a failure leading up to this. So we were meant to record this 48 hours ago, but I was stranded in London, couldn't get back in time. And by the time I got back, it was just like a nightmare. So like, when you have those tight kind of schedules and everything has to kind of work, it's one of those ones. Sometimes they do work, but actually they're never great because even when they do work, you're kind of rushing to get there, and it's not the best preparation. So a bit of a failure there, but but kindly you're flexible, and we're going to have an amazing conversation today. So I'm particularly interested in the subject because I'm always interested in subjects where I know the importance, but I don't know that much about the kind of the subject we're going to cover. Everybody thinks about leadership and they think they know what leadership is, but for a lot of us, it's just a word. And we've got a kind of a stereotype, I think, that we place on the word of leadership. And we think somebody that shouts a lot and is very stern and always wants things done on their terms within milliseconds of requesting it. You kind of think that's a leader. That's an amazing leader. Look at him. He's shouting. He's angry. He's all red-faced. Clearly, he knows what he wants. But I believe that probably isn't the best example of a leader, and we're going to get into that in a second. But you blend EQ into it as well. So I'm keen to understand a bit more about EQ and about how they coexist together, leadership and EQ. But probably where is a good place to start is probably at the beginning of how did you arrive at this leadership EQ blended stage and area of curiosity that you wanted to pursue?
That is, I mean, that's the defining question, right? What failure got us to this point?
we've already talked about mine.
Well, and the thing is, I think everybody hits something. There's a roadblock somewhere for everybody. So for me, I actually started out as a classical musician. I
Oh,
played French
wow.
horn. Yeah.
Amazing. So French horn.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And that's all I'd wanted to do. My dad was military, so we moved every 2 years. And so we were always, somewhere different and someplace different with other people. And I mean, we went all across the country. So it was really different stuff. But every 2 years, no matter where we went, I always had my music. That was the thing that sustained me through all of that because I could bring it with me. It was part of me. So I decided really early that this is what I was going to do. So I went and I did, all the things you're supposed to do. I studied it in college. I went and got my master's. My dad was enlisted in the military. My mom was a housewife. So it's not like there was a lot of money there. So I was working. I'm like, if I work really hard, I can make this happen. Went out and did a lot of gigging, got to play with super cool people like Ray Charles and Mannheim
Really?
Steamroller.
That's
And it
incredible.
was amazing. This field opened up so much for me that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, I have nothing but gratitude for what it did for me. But then eventually went on, got my doctorate because I wanted to have something a little more stable. Gigging isn't always stable, especially in the classical musical world. And I found my job. I went all the way across the country. And French horn professorships. So you're lucky if a university has a music program, much less a French horn professorship. So there might only be between 6 and 10 of these jobs that open in a year.
Sorry, so you did a French horn professorship.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were
Completely
serious.
different. Completely different stuff, right?
Okay, yeah, no, sorry. I just wanted to interject there, just so I heard correctly. So is that so you can teach it to other people that you know the depth of classic horn instrument playing?
Yeah. Not just the playing, especially. You have to be able to perform at a really high level to be
Yeah.
able to go into a university and teach. But I know all of the literature, or as much as anyone's going to. I
Mm.
know the history. And being a musician, you're always doing more than one thing. So I could teach theory. I conducted. I ran, these big horn regional workshops. You wouldn't think there'd be that many horn players in a region, but
Yeah,
you would get like 300 people, horn players that would show up to do this.
really. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal. So the location you were in at the time, you could run a workshop or a session and you would get all these people that would rock up.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
phenomenal. I'm just thinking about today because obviously I don't know how long ago this was, but with the event like we're doing this virtually, could you do a session virtually? Could you do that?
Like
Like a
a
virtual
workshop
session?
like that?
Yeah, like a virtual session, a virtual sort of music horn session where people say me as an example, clearly I would be not even lost at the session beyond that because I can't play it. Wouldn't know what we to even end to start with. But could you do it virtually today?
Totally. And in fact,
Okay,
when COVID hit, that's what a lot of people did. They went to virtual lessons, they went to
okay,
virtual
okay,
concerts, the whole 9 yards. So yeah, you
okay,
absolutely could.
okay, phenomenal, phenomenal. So you got into that space, you did the professorship, and you were
Hmm.
teaching,
Yeah.
educating, and why didn't you stay within that space? Was there a desire to stay in that space, or was it something that you mapped out to do for a period of time, but maybe not stay in that space?
No, at that time I had had every intention of that's where I wanted to be because that's where my heart was. I loved music and I still do. Even though I'm no longer playing. But what actually happened was within my first 3 months of being there, I was assaulted by one of my colleagues.
Oh, right. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And realized at this point I was like in my late 30s. So that's the amount of time and effort and investment that I'd made into this. But unfortunately, because of the place I was at and the way people were, I kept trying to talk to people and say, look, this happened. This is a
Mm.
problem. This person is a problem. And for instance, I went to the guy that would have been both of our bosses. And I was told that as a junior female faculty member, if I was going to be stirring up trouble, I would never get tenure. So I would never get
That's
promoted.
insane. That's
Yeah.
to even use that language. That person clearly shouldn't have been in that job.
Yes.
Stirring up trouble. What are you talking about? Are
Yes.
you not listening to me?
Yes.
Well, I guess we live in a difficult world. I'm hoping that that wouldn't be the norm for somebody within a leadership or a senior role would respond to a serious allegation.
You would hope, especially at an academic institution,
Yeah,
because this is where
absolutely.
people go to learn and to study and to
Mm,
teach. And you'd think if you were going to have a safe place, especially around music, it's not
mm.
heart surgery, it's music. We're here because we love this. And yet this is my experience was that this is what the leadership was all the way to the top.
And also, why, if you're in that type of role, like if you're in that in an institution, whether it be at the place where you were working there or any type of business, you want to be working with people that you can trust, that you know that aren't a threat to you at the time or anybody else.
Yeah,
If people are allowed to pretty much do what they want, where does it end?
right.
Consult
Where does it
anybody.
end?
I think they've got a free run to do what they want.
Yeah. And unfortunately, because I was basically told to sit down and be quiet, I did. And that's what I actually consider to be my greatest failure because I
Mm,
should have stood up. I should have said something. But I believed what he said and I tried to work my way through the system. And it took
mm,
me 7 years to understand the lack of empathy and the lack of emotional intelligence that was inherent in this place. And it went all the way to the top. I
yeah.
mean, you could see it where I was at, but it was all the way. And the thing that really struck me is the first two players in this, I'm pretty sure had malicious intent. I mean, I'm certain that there was just some no good going on there. But as I went up through the system, what I found weren't people that were malicious. They weren't evil. They were overwhelmed. They were overworked. They lacked
Yeah.
empathy and they lacked EQ because they
Mm.
heard this stuff day in and day out. I just could not get anyone to listen. And so by the end of 7 years, my music career had been destroyed. That was it. There was nothing left. And that's about the time we went into COVID. So music and the arts, you know, kind of a death blow. So
It's kind of interesting as you're providing more of a backdrop to what happened. I guess when you get institutions, and probably this might be an interesting place to discuss it, but when you get institutions that are so bogged down with poor or traditionally poor behavior, people are overworked, people have existed in a poor culture for a period of time. You've got people that are in those important leadership positions are pretty much institutionalized into not really leading, exhibiting, beyond actually the opposite of leading. They're actually creating an incredibly poor culture where people can't do the wood for the trees in terms of if something serious happens, and there can be any number of serious things that can happen which can affect somebody's enjoyment and the safety that they need to feel in the workplace. And then I guess that can affect our well-being in a number of different ways, our mental health, sickness, any number of different things, actually performance as well. So I can imagine that potentially there might even be people watching now or listening that might think actually, hmm, this is kind of like I can relate to this. I work in an environment where things happen daily, weekly. It's very difficult for me to know where to go to. And actually, if I do know where to go to, how do I approach it? What language do I do? Do I need to seek somebody out who's got a that maybe is in a senior role and maybe take a leap of faith? Yeah, so I guess there's a big rabbit hole there that needs to be unlocked. I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
I think a lot of this comes back to culture. Whatever the organization is, whether it's academia or healthcare or profit or whatever, if you have a culture where you have the kind of leadership style you were talking about, where it's, it's screaming and red-faced and all of that. It's a command and control leadership style, because that's what they want to do. They want to command and control. And if that's the case, there's zero EQ or empathy being used at all. So if this is that cultural and that ingrained systematically, unfortunately, there's not much you can do. Culture comes from the top. And if the top levels are like this, your health and your sanity is worth it to try and find something else, because it's not going to get better. Now, if you have a leadership that's open to learning and they want to know more and they want to learn and they want to do better, that's different.
You know what we had, as you were talking, I was thinking about an incident that we had a few years ago. I think it was a few years ago. One of our cricket clubs in the UK, one of the leading cricket teams, where there was all kinds of stuff going on, racism allegations and lots of stuff going on. And these were actually former employees, so former cricketers that came out to say, these are the things that we experienced at the time. And at the time, similar to your experience, when they went to speak to maybe the leadership around what they were experiencing, it was kind of laughed at really, and not taken seriously at all. So they had to work and exist within an environment where pretty bad is an understatement. So a few years ago, it all blew up. I think he may have left the club, and he was at a different stage of his life where he felt that he needed to come out, A, because it was wrong, but also he wanted the industry to be, the cricket industry to be aware of this does happen. And to your point, he wished that he maybe had the people that he could spoke to at the time that would take him seriously. But the reason I mention that is because, so I think from what I understand, the allegation was the leadership team, it was pretty, they all operated in the same way. So they all, I guess, ignored this person. So there was nowhere to go to. So the culture was pretty dire. And because of the backlash that the country had about it, because it was news when the newspapers, the radio, television, etc., that the club, I think they've probably lost sponsorship. So at that point, at that time, they've got to react. And now I've to the point you made earlier, that the leadership changed, and I'm sure the club now is in a far healthier state than it was then. But they really had to go to the top to really, I guess, remove the leadership that wasn't leading.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be really hard to do. I mean, those people are in those positions for a reason. They may not be the most humane, but they've done something. They've raised revenue. Fiscally, things are sound. They've created an entity that, for whatever reason, at least on the outside, looks like it works. But if this kind of sickness, if this kind of cancer is what's going on the inside, then that success is not sustainable. It's eventually going to come down. And, you don't like to see any institution or system dismantled. But on the other hand, sometimes cancer has to be cut out.
So your situation is a massively challenging one. That's clearly led to the career that your curiosity around leadership and so EQ. So what came first? Did leadership come first for you, or was it EQ, or did they arrive together?
I knew it at the time,
okay,
but it took a long time to solidify in my brain because it's like I kept looking for answers. I kept trying to figure out, my brain kept chewing on it because I just couldn't let it go. This happened, but why? What could I have done? What could I have done differently? What wasn't right? What was the problem? And so I kept trying to figure out that empathy component is what took me the longest to figure out, because I'm like, okay, they lacked emotional intelligence, but why? We've been talking about emotional intelligence for so long. What is the disconnect? And in the process, I started figuring out that I needed to know more about leadership, that I wanted to be the person who understood this. So, when you're spinning and you're trying to figure out what next, because I've been a musician my whole life. It wasn't just that I did music, I was music. So to disconnect with that actually took a lot. And I needed to find my way. And so I started digging into this leadership side of things. And I was like, you know, I can do more with this. I need to know more about this. And so I actually went to get a second doctorate
This is
in,
incredible. I read that. That's not messing about. That's somebody that is serious. That's definitely mission, purpose driven. Somebody that is going to do a doctorate to really understand this.
yeah. Well, exactly. I didn't want to mess around. I wanted to be super focused and really understand. And the thing with being in a doctoral program, you have access to all this research stuff. You can
Okay.
go in and read about, you know, empathy and EQ and all the big journals and to your heart's content. So, you know, it gave me that opportunity because the doctorate itself is in interdisciplinary leadership. So that's what they do. That's what I immersed myself in because I want to know, I want to understand.
And what did you discover in your studies that were there any kind of eureka moments where you thought, oh, wow, that makes sense. This is where industry or business is seriously compromised.
You know, so because I work with clients, I have the the honor, I guess, of being able to kind of run unofficial case studies
All
and
right.
see what they do that
Mm,
works and what they do that doesn't. And what I'm finding is that if I can reach those middle management positions, the managers, the vice presidents, the directors, because they're in a very unique place, not only to be able to manage down and manage up, but these are the
okay.
people that are eventually going to be filling the top spots. The people in the top spots, unfortunately, it's been my experience that they're pretty set in their ways
Mhm.
and they don't necessarily want to change. And if they don't want to change, there's nothing that I can do. If someone doesn't want to learn, I can't force them to do that. But these people in those middle positions, they want to do better. They can see that
Mm,
something is not right. And they really want to better themselves and better their leadership skills. So that's really where I'm focusing my efforts.
okay. Do you think that those guys at the top that don't want to learn, do you think there's fear involved in that? Because when we've been doing something for such a long time, and we think that everything that we say is on the money, accurate. This is what we're going to do. And then you're kind of asking them to be, actually, that's just one example. There are many different forms of, I guess, being dogmatic and what leadership and what's involved in leadership. But it's maybe they don't want to show, it's the ego, that maybe they don't want to show any signs of sharing responsibility. Maybe they think if they defer a decision or an action to somebody else, maybe that shows a sign of weakness. I don't know.
Yes, you are absolutely on target. A lot of it is fear. People will get into these top positions and they are power positions. I mean,
Mm,
you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. You are doing the work for the entire company. So, you know, there's no doubt about that. They take on a lot. But because of that, they're afraid to have that power kind of taken away, to be questioned, to be seen as weak.
mm,
And that's a big thing with EQ and empathy, because as soon as you say empathy, people think, you know, rainbows and unicorns and Care Bears
mm.
and fluffy things. And it's not. It's a business skill. It's something that can lead to hard outcomes,
Yeah,
increased innovation, increased productivity, increased revenue. But these leaders don't want to be seen as soft. They don't want to be seen as weak. And I mean, to their credit, in a leadership position, it's a really difficult balance. You know, you don't want to be seen as weak. You don't want to be seen as, you know, the injured lion that's going to get picked off. It is a very delicate balancing act.
but can it be seen as strength? If you're, to me, I think it's, I think it's their strength and admiration. When if you want to lead, say, for argument's sake, I work for you, and I work within your team, and we're working on a project, and you might call the team together, say, guys, hi guys, we're working on this project. You know, really important. We've got a deadline of 6 months. We hopefully we're going to make it, but I need some ideas from you. I know that there's people in this room that have expertise that isn't within my remit. So let's brainstorm. Paul, I want you to lead some ideas on this because it isn't my area of expertise. to me, and not just to me, but anybody within that team, that's massively empowering.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly it. But in order to do that, I have to allow myself to be vulnerable to
Yeah.
say, I'm going to hand you this power. I am empowering you to do what needs to be done because I trust you. So in giving that vulnerability, that can be a hard thing to
Mm.
do, you know?
And I guess for anybody that's a leader that's watching this or listening, and they think, you know what, I struggle. I kind of get it. I know, but I struggle to maybe feel that maybe I think the word that you use, that maybe I'm coming across a little bit weak, but they're not. You know, you're reframing that, you're empowering people, you're going to get better, you're going to get better outcomes, you're going to get more respect from your team. They're going to think, yeah, I want to work for Dr. Melissa.
Yeah, exactly. And I would actually take it a step further and say it's actually courageous to
Okay,
be
yeah.
able to show that
Mm,
vulnerability. You know, it's sometimes it's very easy to just stand back and,
yeah, absolutely.
do the command and control thing, but to know you're going to be vulnerable and that you're trusting people, that takes courage. And these leaders to be able to do that, that does take courage, and, major props to the ones who do.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go to a company and they approach you, who invariably would approach you? Would it be a CEO? Would it be C-suite? Would it be somebody that works in HR, or maybe a combination of different people that know that the business needs support in terms of culture, morale, performance? Is there a specific person, or is it a mixture of people that might come and approach you to support them?
Right now, it's kind of a mixture. So I
Okay.
do a lot of one-on-one coaching, which I think is fantastic because, in order to learn, you have to have immediate feedback so you know what you're doing wrong, and you have to have the opportunity to practice. Going back to the music thing, practice makes permanent. So if I'm coaching somebody one-on-one, I can give immediate feedback and then give them the opportunity to practice. So that's where I'm finding a lot of these middle managers and people that are kind of in the middle who want to do better, who
Mm.
can do better, and
Okay,
know
okay,
that there's a different way.
okay. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. So you can get, because I guess the challenge with leadership in business all over the world is sometimes that we get elevated to a position and we don't have the we're not given the training to be
Yeah.
able to lead effectively, impactfully. And I think people that know that, sometimes we
Yes.
know, and if we've got that foresight, then we'll seek someone like you yourself out, and that's really going to help us really be a rock star in our role, and really be a rock star for people that report into us, or colleagues, and so forth.
Yeah.
So just in relation to leadership and empathy, how do they blend together? Is awareness an important part of that?
Yes. Actually, the very first thing I teach is the ability to self-reflect. So you'll get these people in top positions, and it's exactly like you said. They may not be there because they're the best leader. They might be there because they're the top moneymaker.
Mm,
I was working with a lawyer, and he was the one that brought in the biggest, like, high dollar cases, but it wasn't that he'd had a lot of leadership experience. So a lot of times they know that something's missing, but they don't know what. But because they're in these super top level, super gunner, very active positions, they're not always the best to themselves, because these are the ones that will work, 500 hours a week and probably neglect seeing their families, probably neglect themselves, maybe not do what they need to do as far as exercise and nutrition and the things that, keep us whole human beings. So they're not even showing themselves empathy and compassion. Well, until you can self-reflect and figure out, well, maybe I'm just putting this off. Maybe I'm compartmentalizing all this stuff so that I'm not doing it. What do I need to do to actually be in contact with myself? Until you can show empathy and compassion to yourself, you're going to have a really hard time showing it to anybody else.
okay, okay. So you start with you.
Yeah,
You start with you.
yeah,
Okay, okay. So I think it can be, particularly in the workplace today, and potentially for leaders, it's always been that way. Sometimes you can't, I think I've used this phrase before, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. because we're so busy, preoccupied, making sure that we want to do everything perfectly. We've got different meetings going on, so you're having to remember you have to stay on top of those meetings, different conversations, different initiatives that I think is very easy to exist on autopilot where we're just reacting. So that reflective piece that you spoke about is not even there because we just can't think, we can't stop, we're just so busy.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, think about it from a cultural standpoint too. If you've got leaders up at the top and you see them, I mean, our leaders are always on stage. They're always being seen. And if you see these leaders and they're willing to show themselves compassion and themselves empathy and still have a strong business model, the people that are watching are going to see this.
Yeah.
Culture always comes down from the top, always drips down from the top. So if this is what your leadership is doing, suddenly for everybody else underneath, they're also able to pick up on this and go, yes, I can show myself self-empathy. I can show myself compassion.
Yeah, totally. I can imagine as well. There's a couple of thoughts out of my head. So one, I can imagine that leaders that operate with empathy and EQ, I imagine that they're happier in the workplace, because I think if you're one of those old school, like controlled leaders, to me, it almost feels like you never quite have control because you're trying to control and get things delivered out of fear. You probably deep down know that most of your colleagues don't really like you. The people that maybe go to lunch with you or maybe go out for drink with you after work, they're doing it because of fear, not really because they want to be in your company. I think that some leaders they accept that and they probably never verbalize that, but deep down they probably know. And I don't think you can have that same level of enjoyment because when we go to work, we want to enjoy it, even those difficult moments. We want to exist in a culture where when we have those difficult moments, if we've got the right culture, then the business collectively is better placed to navigate those moments.
Yeah. The word that I hear most often from leadership is that they feel unfulfilled.
Okay, really?
Yeah. That they're doing their job and they're doing everything right, within the boundaries, but yet their job somehow is unfulfilling because they know there's a disconnect there somewhere. So, I mean, the problems of not being able to employ empathy run all up and down for everybody.
I was thinking as well, as another question that came to mind as you were talking. So, particularly because of all the studies that you do across music and different areas and leadership, is this something that I don't know whether you teach?
Absolutely. Interestingly, there's a handful of European and Asian countries, especially kind of the Norse countries. They actually do what's called social emotional learning. And empathy, emotional intelligence, emotional skills is part of this. And they'll start kids on this as young as 6 years old. And it'll go all the way through until they're like 16. So instead of throwing people into these businesses and leadership positions with no idea, they instill this stuff really young. And if I was queen of the world and I could do whatever I wanted, I would do that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important.
And I was thinking as well around those businesses that I get to speak to a lot of people that are in startups, people that founders, entrepreneurs that have got a business and they're looking to scale. And when you get to that point where you're looking to scale, clearly that's part of it. You need to have those, even other people on the podcast that have cited. There's one guy that was on the podcast. He kept to have people kept on leaving his company, and he worked in what was it? It might have been painting or decorating. Certainly, it was in a building trade, and he just couldn't understand it. The business was doing well, but people kept on leaving him. And I think he spoke to I think it might have been his coach or maybe family member, and he was saying, I don't understand. I don't understand why everyone keeps on leaving. And they asked him a question like, well, how many people have left? And I forget what the number was. And he goes, it's obviously you're the problem. He was like, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm the problem? He goes, you must be the problem because if you're getting all these people that are coming joining the company, the wages are comparative to, or maybe better than your competitors in the state who are based in the US. And so it has to be you. I think he initially, I'm not sure he took it that well, but then once he had time to reflect, he realized, yeah, you know what, it must be me. And he looked at, he developed, I think he went on courses, which was great because he was somebody that reflected and realized that he was the problem. Although the business was doing well, he was actually compromising the culture and everything in the business, and he changed massively. And today he's a new man,
Yeah.
and the business is doing better, even better.
See, and that's a success story. That's what I love to hear. Because by just being able to tap into that humanity, now his business is thriving and he's
Yeah,
probably doing better. Because my guess would be he was one of those startup entrepreneurs that drove really hard and pushed really hard and put in all the extra hours and burned the candle at both ends and all of that. So he wasn't showing himself empathy or compassion, and it trickled right down through the culture. I would guess. That would be my
yeah,
guess.
yeah. I think, yeah, no, I think he would echo your sentiments. And to labour on a point that we've mentioned, he was an entrepreneur, became a business owner, never had anything like these skills that you need. So there's potentially lots of people out there that just, and also you're happier. We're happier when, because he's happier now. And that's even being selfish. Even if we want to be selfish, we want to enjoy work where you don't have the angst of butting heads with people.
Yeah.
Just focus. Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be happier at work? I think everyone's pretty much going to say yes to that. Then actually think, particularly if you're a leader, just think about actually you can have that. You just need to maybe, I guess, get in touch with you. And I saw something on, I think I read this on your website or maybe one of your videos, but you talk about being a modern leader. There are different nuances and intricacies to that. Can I exist as a modern leader, but in a style that befits me compared to you? So your style, we still exhibit the core traits of being a modern leader with empathy, but we do it within the nuances that really help us excel.
Absolutely. In fact, I think having that authenticity and that ability to be
Mm,
yourself is really the core of being a modern leader. What change comes at everybody so fast.
mm,
I mean, technologically, with the generational stuff post COVID, you have to be able to approach this stuff authentically as who you are, because we are all going to approach this differently. But by being able to approach it empathically, we can actually take modern leadership and turn it into something that is really above and beyond the old command and control style, which is what we
yeah,
lived under for centuries, maybe. I
yeah.
mean, it's been a
Totally.
long time.
Leaders walking around red face where they're just shouting to get things done at
Yeah.
people. So you mentioned just in terms of COVID and we talk about the great resignation, people working from home. How has that impacted leaders? Are they having to tap into different skills, particularly when you talk about hybrid working, where maybe you're not seeing your staff every day, but you still want to lead impactfully? Is there a different nuance that we're having to tap into?
Yeah, I would say it's more like, everything old is new again in a way, because the problem with technology is it puts this veneer of this lack of emotion and this untouchableness. So it adds another layer to it, but it's still the same idea of you need to connect with people on a human to human level.
Yeah.
And whether that's because we're on Zoom, we're on two completely
Mm,
different sides of the world, but yet I feel that we have a connection.
mm,
We've been able to, talk to each other and have this interaction. So just because we're dealing with technology doesn't mean the human to human stuff changes.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm still thinking about, yeah, leaders being just, I think you can even be like selfish and just want to enjoy your job more and then just release the shackles where your ego's holding you back and you're not even enjoying work. You can't enjoy work if we're being controlling. So just in terms, I mentioned a lot about your content. So you've got wonderful content, got a YouTube channel, got a website. So there's lots going on there. Are you writing a book? Is there a book coming out at some point?
Yeah, it's coming out in September. I'm really excited about
Okay,
this because I'm
amazing.
able to actually codify it.
Okay, lovely, lovely. And that's on this topic. So for people that are thinking, actually, I definitely need to get this book, what will they be what will they be getting from it? I guess it's for leaders or anybody that wants to develop their leadership skills.
Yeah, I say leaders and aspiring leaders,
Okay.
but really, I mean, especially as far as the self-reflection, that could go for
Mm,
anybody. I specifically try to reach leaders because that's where not only can they do the most damage, but they can do the most good
mm.
because of all the people that they contact and they want to be fulfilled. They want to be
Yeah,
happy.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So where would be the best place for people to find you?
So if they want to be able to actually reach out and contact me, my website is good. And in fact, you can sign up for the newsletter and then I can keep people informed of what's going on with the book and
Amazing.
exactly when it's coming out. LinkedIn and Instagram. Yeah,
Cool.
always happy to talk to people. And then the YouTube channel, which is the
Okay, lovely.
Empathic Leader. And I would love to have more subscribers there because that's kind of my playground. That's where I
Yeah.
get to test some of this stuff and talk to people and converse. So
No, you know, you've got a wonderful YouTube channel. I've delved into your content over the last few days. And
thank you.
also, so for people that obviously you're US based, so if there are people that mention you do one-to-one coaching, so if there's people that want to reach out to you in that regard, could somebody in the UK, for instance, reach out to you? Does it matter where people are located?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that is the beauty of technology. I'd be more than happy to work with anybody who wants to learn and is open to a little different way of thinking.
Okay, okay. But I think it's the right way of thinking. I think it's the modern way. I think you it's about the modern leader. I think the modern leader, I think, gets more done, has more fun, gets better results. So that's the leader I think that we all, if we're not aspiring to, I think certainly we've given people a lot of food for thought. So we have one recurring question on the podcast, which is if you could invite three inspirational people for dinner, they can be alive or past, who would you invite?
This was a really hard one. I had to actually put my thinking cap on to come up with three. So my first one would actually be Bruce Lee
Okay, I love Bruce Lee.
because yeah, I mean he never wanted to be an actor. He went to school to be a philosopher. He wanted, to be able to embrace that and do his kung fu school, but he felt his English wasn't good enough. So his failure became his
Oh,
success in
really? I didn't know that. I
Hollywood.
didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and I just think he was such a phenomenal human being.
Mm,
I would love to be able to sit down and just pick his brain for
yeah.
about 10 hours.
I think he might be on my dinner table actually.
He would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then my second one, and this one's closer to home for you than me, is Banksy.
Yeah.
Because here's a person that's creating social change through what he's doing. I mean, we assume it's a he. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about him, but he's got such a rebellious view on it. And the art he creates is so beautiful. I would love to know more about this person. And he's not in the public eye at all by design. In a world where everybody wants to be in the public eye on social media, he's like, nope, I do all this
Yeah.
anonymously. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm going to send you a link after we recorded. There's a wonderful podcast. It's a BBC Sounds podcast, and it's called Banksy. And it's somebody I actually met the lady recently at an event, but they talk to I think it's probably about a 6 or 7 part documentary, but it's a wonderful listen. But the reason I mention it because I met the lady that's part of it, and she worked with Banksy. So she doesn't. So we still don't know who Banksy is, but she just gives a backdrop to the 90s when he was 90s or early noughties when he was exploding, what it was like, the energy, the kind of the craziness. So after this, I'll send you a link to that.
Oh, that would be amazing because I consume stuff about him because
It's
he just
phenomenal. I wasn't aware of it. I think somebody sent me a link to it and I listened to it in literally, I think it was a Saturday or a Saturday afternoon. I just listened to all of it straight.
Oh man. Well, I know what I'm going to be doing this weekend then. That would
Yeah.
be perfect. And then the third person would actually be Aretha Franklin, because she actually came up through the music business, in Detroit in a time when women weren't necessarily given much
Mm.
power. As an African American woman, she wasn't given much power. She was cheated and hurt financially as she was coming up through the ranks, but she was such a powerful force, and her voice is just like no other. And the kind of stratospheric success she had working with Annie Lennox, working with George Michael, working with the London Phil, working with all these amazing artists. I would love to just hear her life story from her lips.
Yeah, no, she'd be phenomenal. She'd be
Yeah.
phenomenal. And just an amazing artist with a unique perspective and a golden era of music. Well, there were so many superstars, but she shone out probably beyond a lot of those phenomenal musicians that were around at that time. So well, they all shone brightly in fairness, but obviously she was special.
Yeah. And continued her entire life.
Yeah,
She was always the core of what was Aretha Franklin was always the same, but she was always reinventing and trying new
yeah,
things and different collaborate. She was never afraid to learn and try. And I just think that's so cool.
yeah. I think that's massive inspiration, that ability to adapt and to adapt because I think we can exist in boxes where we think we can only do one thing. Like the way that you've adapted from music to a leadership expert, and you probably possibly people when you delving into music probably wouldn't have thought that you'd have transitioned into a leadership expert. So it just shows that we all can adapt. We just have to, I guess, find something that really motivates us, compels us, we have passion around, and the passion is beyond, I guess, supersedes everything. And then we think we can get it done, we can adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that in itself is inspirational because we can
Mm.
always adapt and overcome.
Absolutely, as you are, and you're helping people do exactly the same. So yeah, so amazing. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, discussing a really important and interesting subject and a really up-to-date overview that you have on the subject of leadership.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. If this were a societal, I mean, think societally, if we each gained 10% more empathy and EQ,
Yeah,
what would it mean for the whole society?
massive.
Yeah,
It would cascade into so many elements, like socially, when we're going out socially, we're more respectful. When we're on a motorway or highway, we're more respectful. When we go to sporting events, we're more respectful. It just goes on forever.
yeah.
So, so yeah, it's no, I'm intrigued to maybe have more conversations with you. Definitely let me know when the book comes out, because what we can do, we can update the show notes and put a link to the book in the show notes.
Well, that would be fantastic. And I've just enjoyed this so much. This was delightful. Thank you so much.
Delightful for me. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of My Perfect Failure. If you're watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. It really does help us grow the channel, which we're really keen to do. Your feedback is most welcome. So we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the feedback page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.